What happened on Court 11 at the U.S. Open on August 27, 2025 was supposed to be a simple celebration of an underdog victory. Instead, it turned into one of the most talked about controversies in recent tennis history. The incident involved two professional tennis players, an upset victory, and words exchanged at the net that sparked discussions about sportsmanship, respect, and the treatment of black athletes in a sport that has historically been dominated by white players. Taylor Townsend, an American tennis player ranked 139th in the world, faced off against Jelena Ostapenko from Latvia, who was seeded 25th in the tournament. Ostapenko was a former French Open champion from 2017, someone with a proven track record at the highest levels of tennis. On paper, this match seems straightforward. Most people expected Ostapenko to win relatively easily and move forward in the tournament. But sports have a funny way of surprising us, and this match was about to become memorable for all the wrong reasons. Townsend came into this match with something to prove. While she had achieved remarkable success in doubles tennis, becoming the world #1 in that format with multiple Grand Slam titles to her name, singles success had been more elusive. She had been grinding away on the tour for years, trying to break through in singles competition while already being recognized as one of the best doubles players in the world. This tournament represented an opportunity for her to show that she belonged among the elite in singles tennis as well. From the first game, Townsend played with confidence and determination. Her serve was working well, and she was hitting clean returns that put Ostapenko on the defensive. As the match progressed, it became increasingly clear that Ostapenko was getting frustrated. The first set was competitive and tight, with both players holding serve for much of it. But Townsend managed to break through when it mattered most, taking the opening set 7-5. The momentum had shifted in her favor, and everyone watching could sense that something special might be happening. The second set was where Townsend truly took control of the match. Whether Ostapenko started to crack under the pressure or Townsend simply elevated her game to another level, what followed was a dominant display of tennis. Townsend won the second set convincingly by a score of 6-1. In total, she had won 9 consecutive games, completely overwhelming her higher-ranked opponent. The crowd at Court 11 was ecstatic. Here was an American player, ranked outside the top 100, taking down a seeded former Grand Slam champion on home soil. These are the kinds of moments that make sports special, the stories that inspire young players and remind everyone why they love the game. Townsend walked to the net with a huge smile on her face, ready to shake hands with Ostapenko and celebrate one of the biggest victories of her career. The handshake is a tradition in tennis, a moment of sportsmanship that acknowledges both the competition and mutual respect between players. But instead of the typical quick handshake and congratulations that usually happens, something completely different occurred. As they met at the net, Ostapenko began speaking to Townsend in an aggressive manner. Rather than walking away after the handshake, both players stayed at the net, with Ostapenko pointing her finger at Townsend and clearly saying something that was upsetting. The crowd's cheers quickly turned to boos as spectators realized that something was wrong. The cameras captured the entire exchange, and while not everything could be heard clearly at first, enough was audible to understand that this was not a normal post-match interaction. According to what Townsend later told reporters, Ostapenko accused her of having no class and no education. She reportedly said these things multiple times, repeating the word education 3 times during their exchange. Ostapenko also allegedly told Townsend to see what happens when they play outside of the United States, which Townsend interpreted as a threat or challenge. The partisan crowd watching from the stands immediately began booing loudly, clearly upset by what they were witnessing. When Townsend finally walked away from the net, she went to the stands and encouraged the crowd's reaction, waving her arm overhead as the noise from spectators grew even louder. After the match, when reporters asked Townsend to explain what had happened, she showed remarkable composure and maturity. She explained that competition brings out strong emotions in people and that some players get upset when they lose. She said she wasn't going to back down when someone insulted her, especially after she had conducted herself with nothing but respect throughout the match. Townsend made it clear that she expects the same level of respect that she shows to others, and she wasn't going to accept being treated poorly just because she won. When asked specifically whether she felt there were racial undertones to Ostapenko's comments about education, Townsend's response was thoughtful and measured. She said she didn't personally take it that way, but she acknowledged that being called uneducated has historically been used as a way to demean black people. She explained that this stereotype about black people lacking education is something that has existed in their community for a long time, even though it's completely false. Townsend made it clear that as a proud black woman, she tries her best to represent herself, her culture, and her community in the best possible way, both on and off the court. Ostapenko, meanwhile, took to social media to explain her side of the story. In posts on her Instagram stories, she claimed that the entire situation started because Townsend had been disrespectful during the match. According to Ostapenko, there was a moment during a crucial point when Townsend hit a shot that touched the top of the net before going over, giving her a lucky advantage. In tennis, it's considered good sportsmanship to acknowledge when you get lucky with a net cord by raising your hand or saying sorry to your opponent. Ostapenko said that Townsend didn't do this, and that was what upset her. Ostapenko also complained about how Townsend had warmed up before the match. According to the Latvian player, tennis rules state that players should begin their warm-up at the baseline, but Townsend started at the net. Ostapenko said this was disrespectful and against the rules. However, Townsend explained in her press conference that she has always warmed up this way, going back to her junior tennis days and her very first professional match. She pointed out that this wasn't the first time she had played Ostapenko, so if it was really such a problem, it should have been addressed before. Townsend said she wasn't trying to throw Ostapenko off her game or be disrespectful. She was simply doing what she always does as part of her routine. In one particularly controversial part of her Instagram post, Ostapenko wrote something that raised many eyebrows. She said that just because Townsend was playing in her homeland, it didn't mean she could behave however she wanted. Many people found this comment troubling, wondering what exactly Ostapenko meant by referring to America as Townsend's homeland in that context. The phrasing seemed to carry implications beyond just tennis etiquette. The tennis world's reaction was swift and widespread. Other players began weighing in on the controversy, with several high-profile athletes defending Townsend. Naomi Osaka, who has herself faced unfair treatment and criticism throughout her career, spoke out strongly in support of Townsend. Osaka pointed out that telling a black player they have no education is one of the worst things you can say in a sport that is predominantly white. She emphasized that this kind of language carries historical weight and significance that goes far beyond tennis. Coco Gauff, another prominent black American tennis player, also defended Townsend publicly. The support from fellow players, particularly other black athletes who understood the deeper implications of what had been said, was significant. It showed that the tennis community recognized this wasn't just about two players having an argument. It was about respect, dignity, and the ongoing challenges that black athletes face in spaces where they have historically been marginalized or excluded. 3 days after the match, Ostapenko posted an apology on her Instagram stories. In the apology, she claimed that English is not her native language, and when she used the word education, she was only referring to tennis etiquette. She said she understood how her words could have offended people beyond just the tennis court. However, many people found this apology insufficient for several reasons. First, Ostapenko has been competing on the professional tennis tour for over a decade and has done countless interviews in English. Second, she had repeated the word education 3 times during the argument, which suggested it wasn't just a language mix-up. Third, and perhaps most notably, she never mentioned Taylor Townsend by name in her apology. Ostapenko also posted another message saying she had received many messages accusing her of racism. She wrote that she had never been racist in her life and that she respects all nations and people from all over the world. She said it didn't matter to her where someone comes from. While some people viewed this as a good faith effort to clarify her intentions, others saw it as defensive and missing the point of why people were upset. When Townsend was informed about Ostapenko's apology during a press conference following a doubles match, her reaction was telling. She smiled as a reporter read the apology to her and responded by saying it was nice that Ostapenko apologized and that it was fine and cool. However, she also made it clear that she hadn't heard from Ostapenko personally and that she viewed this as a learning lesson for her opponent. Townsend said that people cannot push their expectations onto others, which is ultimately what had happened. Ostapenko expected Townsend to react a certain way to the net cord, and when she didn't, it made Ostapenko angry, leading her to say things that were hurtful and offensive. Throughout all of this controversy and attention, Townsend kept her focus where it mattered most, on her tennis. Her next match was against Mira Andreeva, the 5th seed in the tournament, which was an extremely difficult draw. Many people might have been distracted or emotionally drained after dealing with such a public incident, but Townsend used it as motivation. She won that match in straight sets, advancing to the 4th round of the U.S. Open. It was the deepest run she had made in a Grand Slam singles tournament since 2019. When she walked onto the court for that match, she wore an outfit with flames on the sleeves, which many observers noted was symbolic of a phoenix rising from the ashes. The contrast between the two players in the days following their match couldn't have been more stark. While Ostapenko was eliminated in the 2nd round and was dealing with negative publicity and criticism, Townsend was still in the tournament, playing great tennis and earning new fans with her grace and professionalism. Townsend told reporters that she was most proud of keeping the main thing the main thing. She thanked everyone who had supported her over the previous 48 hours and said it was bigger than just her. It was about the message, about representation, and about being bold enough to show up as yourself. This incident also brought attention to some ongoing issues in professional tennis. The sport has a complicated history when it comes to race. Black players have been competing in tennis for decades, but they have often faced discrimination, skepticism, and double standards. Althea Gibson broke the color barrier in tennis in the 1950s, becoming the first black player to compete at the highest levels. The Williams sisters, Venus and Serena, revolutionized the sport and became two of the greatest players in history, but they also faced constant criticism and questions about their behavior, their appearance, and their intelligence throughout their careers. There's a persistent double standard in how black athletes are treated compared to their white counterparts. When white players show emotion on the court, throw their rackets, or argue with officials, it's often described as passion or competitiveness. When black players do the same things, they're more likely to be called angry, aggressive, or out of control. This pattern has been documented repeatedly across multiple sports, not just tennis. The question of education as an insult is particularly loaded when directed at a black person. For centuries, black people in America and around the world were denied access to education through both legal restrictions and social barriers. Even after legal segregation ended, educational disparities continued due to systemic racism. Calling a black person uneducated taps into this long, painful history. It suggests that they are somehow less intelligent or less worthy of respect, reinforcing stereotypes that have been used to justify discrimination. What made this incident even more significant is that it happened in front of a large audience at one of tennis's most prestigious events. The U.S. Open is played in New York City and draws huge crowds and television viewership. Everything that happens there is scrutinized and discussed. The fact that the exchange was captured on camera and could be heard by spectators and viewers meant that it couldn't be easily dismissed or ignored. Ostapenko's history also came into play in how people reacted to the incident. She had been involved in other controversial moments during her career. In 2021, she had a contentious match against Jelena Ostapenko at Wimbledon, where Tomljanovic accused her of lying about needing a medical timeout. Ostapenko has a reputation for being emotional on the court and for getting into disputes with opponents. Some people see this as competitive fire, while others view it as poor sportsmanship. This wasn't the first time she had been at the center of controversy. The Women's Tennis Association and U.S. Open officials found themselves in a difficult position. On one hand, Ostapenko's behavior was clearly problematic and violated the spirit of sportsmanship that tennis is supposed to represent. On the other hand, she was a former Grand Slam champion who brings attention and interest to tournaments. There was also the question of what kind of punishment or consequence would be appropriate. The tour has codes of conduct that cover on-court behavior, but much of what happened occurred during the post-match handshake, which is a gray area. As of the time these events occurred, there was significant pressure on tennis authorities to take action. Sponsors and fans were watching to see how the situation would be handled. Some people called for Ostapenko to be fined or suspended, while others thought the public backlash and damage to her reputation was punishment enough. The debate highlighted larger questions about how sports organizations should handle incidents that involve potential racism or discrimination. For Taylor Townsend, the incident ultimately became part of her story, but not the defining element. At 29 years old, she was having the best singles tennis of her career at a time when many people might have written her off. She's also a mother, which adds another layer to her journey. So, balancing professional sports at the highest level with motherhood is incredibly challenging, and relatively few athletes manage to do it successfully. Townsend represents a different kind of tennis story than the typical narrative of teenage prodigies winning Grand Slams. Her composure throughout the entire situation earned her respect far beyond just tennis fans. The way she handled being insulted publicly, refusing to back down while also taking the high road in her public comments, showed a maturity and strength of character that impressed people. She didn't let the incident derail her tournament or her focus. Instead, she channeled whatever anger or hurt she might have felt into her performance on the court. The broader tennis community's response was also notable. Players from different countries and backgrounds came together to support Townsend and call out problematic behavior. This showed some progress in how the sport approaches these issues compared to decades past, when such incidents might have been brushed aside or ignored. Social media played a role in amplifying the story and giving people a platform to share their reactions and perspectives. At the same time, the incident revealed that there's still work to be done in making tennis a truly inclusive and welcoming space for everyone. The fact that such an incident could happen at all, and that questions about racial undertones even needed to be asked, showed that the sport hasn't fully reckoned with its history and ongoing issues around race and equality. Ostapenko's reputation took a significant hit from this controversy. In professional sports, your image and how you're perceived matters, especially when it comes to sponsorships and endorsements. Companies want to be associated with athletes who represent their brands positively. Being seen as difficult, disrespectful, or insensitive to racial issues is not the kind of image that attracts sponsors. Since her French Open victory in 2017, Ostapenko's career had been inconsistent, with periods of great play mixed with early exits from tournaments. This controversy added another challenge to her professional standing. The discussion around tennis etiquette that sparked the initial argument is also interesting to consider. The sport has many unwritten rules and customs that are passed down through generations of players. Apologizing for a net cord, while not required by any official rule, is one of these customs. Different players have different views on whether these traditions should be maintained or whether they're outdated. Some players are very strict about etiquette, while others care less about the formalities and focus more on the competition itself. Townsend's point about expectations is important. She argued that players shouldn't push their expectations onto others. If you expect someone to apologize for a net cord and they don't, getting extremely upset about it says more about your expectations than about their behavior. The net cord itself is just luck, a random occurrence in the game. Whether or not someone acknowledges it doesn't change the outcome of the point or the match. As American tennis looks toward the future with Serena Williams retired and Venus Williams nearing the end of her career, players like Taylor Townsend become even more important. She represents the next generation of American tennis, and her journey, being different from the typical path of a top player, makes her relatable to many people. She's someone who worked hard, faced setbacks, achieved success in one area of the sport, while continuing to pursue her dreams in another, and showed that it's never too late to have breakthrough moments. The incident at the U.S. Open became a teaching moment for the sport and for sports in general. It showed why words matter, why historical context is important when evaluating what people say, and why athletes need to think carefully about how they conduct themselves both during and after competition. It also demonstrated that in today's world, everything is recorded and shared instantly. There's no hiding from controversial moments or hoping they'll be forgotten quickly. For young players coming up through the ranks, both black players and players of all backgrounds, this incident offered lessons about dignity, professionalism, and standing up for yourself. Townsend showed that you don't have to accept disrespect, but you also don't have to sink to someone else's level. You can stand your ground while still maintaining your own standards of behavior. The story of what happened between Taylor Townsend and Jelena Ostapenko at the 2025 U.S. Open is ultimately about much more than tennis. It's about respect, about the ongoing challenges that black athletes face in predominantly white spaces, and about how we as a society respond when these issues come to light. It's about whether we're willing to have difficult conversations about race and fairness, or whether we'd rather pretend these problems don't exist. And it's about celebrating athletes who show us what true class and professionalism look like, even when they're being treated unfairly.